Come on, give us a yes, dear.
Yes, dear.
Yay!
Did that go for both of us? Was I included too? Okay. Okay.
I've lost all motion, movement, and control of my left hand and arm and my right hand and arm. And I still don't have any control of my legs yet.
Hello! Just sending a message to all y'all out there.
I love you, dear.
Woo!
How far did you go in science? How far did you go into school? And we'll just really just be making conversation.
Here we are in High Palm, California, my father and I, he's here for a month with me in the wild with no electricity other than solar and no cell phone service, and harvesting a bunch of food and canning and just like taking the time to really drop in with each other, and it's really special. And I have this idea of creating a life story documentary, if you will. Dorinda wants to say hi. And to be able to not only get to know you better, but also to really harness the wisdom and the knowledge that you've gained in your life. And so, yeah.
I was born November the 2nd, 1946. The delivering physician was my uncle, Dr. Lewis, and I was born in Granite, Oklahoma that same day. And that is pretty much it. I spent my youth, my first 4 years in Stillwater, Oklahoma, where Mom and Dad had their second child, my little brother Randy, William Randall Spangle.
Do you want to pause and just say your brothers and sisters real quick?
Yes, very good.
And your mom and dad's name?
My dad's name was George. My mother's name was Muriel. So from youngest to oldest, Charles Robert, then Penny, then Pam, then Ron, who died when he was about 20 years old. He was my senior year in college. He got clipped by a drunk driver and flipped his car over and had a fatal traffic accident on Highway 78 near Wiley, Texas. And then Randy, and then I'm the oldest, George Richard Spangle. Thank you. Now then, after taking reserve officer training, I was graduated in January of 1969 with a Bachelor of Business Administration in Marketing with a minor in accounting because I had enough classes in accounting and statistics and business mathematics and one or two other ones where they gave me a minor in accounting, which later on I used in being a practicing tax accountant. I was selected to go to counterintelligence, military intelligence training, and then what they called area studies, which was learning how to be a spy. Texas A&M's got a history of what they call elite unit preparation. And so part of our training at Texas A&M was for what they call elite units. And about a third of our entire program was taught to us by the CIA. And we learned how to establish covers and live cover stories and set up false identities, 2 or 3 false identities, etc., etc., etc. From there, I was assigned as field office commander in Houston, Texas, and I served there for 5 months when a paperwork mistake caused the government to lose part of my paperwork, and they threatened me and told me that if I didn't re-sign my paperwork I was going to have to go to Vietnam. And so I took the alternative and I signed up to go to Vietnam. Hello everyone. My name is Rick Spangle. And I'm opening up the tripod on our camera.
To the place that's your mother coming home to the place I belong. That's your mama. Your mama coming home to the place I belong.
We are here to nurture each other and come back into communion with the Divine Mother. Frequencies is what we be, the same seed in you and in me, unlocking the truth of our history. In our hearts, we always hold the key.
How did you feel in your heart when you first met my mom?
Wow. That's really hard to explain because it was pretty much like you would think, a little fluttering. And your mother and I got to know each other pretty well while she was living out behind, Uncle Frederick's house. So we got to know each other pretty well, pretty quick. We got to be friends pretty quick. So that's what I remember the most.
Well, I'm sure you remember more than that. Just getting to know her.
I said that's what I remember the most.
Hanging out with her at Uncle Frederick's.
Mm-hmm. And just learning to be friends.
Do you feel like she was introducing you to more spiritual things, or you were introducing her to more spiritual things? Because I know you guys were both...
We actually introduced each other. We kind of like it was both discovering at the same time. It was not me leading her, and it wasn't her leading me. It was something that we were actually doing together.
And did you guys meditate together?
Yes, we did.
Did you practice mind-to-mind healing with Benjamin Bibb? That was your teacher?
Mm-hmm.
Benjamin Bibb?
Mm-hmm.
And he taught you guys about mind-to-mind healing.
Mind to mind. Mm-hmm. That is true. Yoga tree.
And how did you feel when you found out that she was pregnant with Ryan? Was it planned or was it surprise?
Wow. What a good question. Both of you were welcome surprises. We weren't really trying, but we weren't trying not to either.
Right.
And we did understand where children came from.
So you were excited.
Yeah.
I definitely want to ask you about the story about when you would hold me underwater, but not right now.
I am love, I am lover, I am freedom, I am free. I am part of the beauty that is all around me. My feet are planted on the earth, my heart reaches towards the sky. I am strong in my power, and with love I shall fly.
Explain to us about light, love, and power, the three aspects of the...
Okay. As your mother and I were opening up our consciousness at the Unity Church of Dallas, and our teacher was a guy by the name of Donald Curtis. He wrote one of his what he called his Christ Way lessons, learning to be like Christ and live a life of service. And this one-page article was on the three aspects of God. The light aspect being logic, the love aspect being attachment, and power being control. Out of that one page, I took and started watching people's personalities, where you could actually tell if a person was a logical person deep down, whether that person was seeking an attachment deep down, or whether or not that person was into control deep down. And so I started watching people's personalities, and all of a sudden one day realized that each of us appear to have one of the aspects of God as his given spiritual arena, so to speak, but we all have the ability to carry the other two also. So the light, the love, and the power are the way that humans express their part of spiritual being, even though sometimes it doesn't seem that way.
I am love, I am lover, I am freedom, I am free. I am part of the beauty that is all around me. My feet are planted on the earth, my heart reaches towards the sky. I am strong in my power, and with love I shall fly.
There's a story that you used to tell me all the time about how you would hold me underwater, and then you asked me what would happen if I stayed under there too long. Will you tell that story?
I remember that story well. It's one of my top 3 or 4 favorite stories, because you were showing your spiritual side at an extremely young age, and I'm thinking you were 7, 8-ish. And no, younger,
Way younger.
maybe 5.
4 or 5, I think.
Well, 4.
5.
I'm thinking 5. Okay. And your favorite thing to do was for me to have you, hold you, while you were underwater. And I would hold you, and I would walk around with you underwater, going like this, and like this. And then I'd raise you up. I'd be afraid that something would happen. And I'd raise you up and you would say, "Not now, Daddy, not now, Daddy." And so you'd take a deep breath and I'd do the same thing for it would seem like endless hours.
Because I would want to stay under, that's why I would say.
That's right.
not
You
now.
would want to stay underwater. So early on you were loving water, and I just got to talking with you at 5 years old, and I asked you what happens if you hold your breath too long. And you said, "Well, Daddy, you would die." And I said, "Well, what happens to you when you die?" And you kind of smiled and put a smile on my face, and she said, "They'll never catch me."
I am love, I am lover, I am freedom, I am free. I am part of the beauty that is all around me. My feet are planted on the earth, my heart reaches towards the sky. I am strong in my power, and with love I shall fly. I am love, I am lover, I am freedom, I am free. I am part of the beauty that is all around me. My feet are planted on the earth, my heart reaches towards the sky. I am strong in my power, and with love I shall fly.
Humans with extraterrestrial beings.
Oh,
What is the actual name that you call it?
Okay, it's called interrupted evolution, according to supernatural order. What do you think? I came up with that in 1983.
I see colors from
Before it was popular.
Before it was even unpopular.
oh, by the sun I wait, watching television for my lifeline, operas of the soul to wash away. Godspeed, wise soul, to seize the Savior, hear my pleas. I was always hunting on the sidelines, looking for motion and change. I was always willing to be slavery, for broken men abused me, to cut that cord they used me. Godspeed,
gonna start off the interview with a good glass of bone broth here from the organic free-range chicken that we cooked last night.
Bless you. Did your throat did that help you?
Yeah.
You want some more of it? Maybe after you digest.
Yeah,
Is your throat
why
still
not?
sore?
Yeah.
Is your throat still sore?
My God.
Est-ce que tu fait toujours mal?
No.
Oh, good, cool. Yeah, the fuse is pretty old.
I want you to look up the
numbers.
The numbers, yes, the numbers.
We gotta get the numbers. We gotta find the truth behind the numbers.
The truth behind the numbers.
And Google can tell us.
Salt water is sodium chloride.
Ice and glaciers come and go. 18,000 years ago, Ice Age.
Now that we're on this topic, I want to ask something because this is something that
He's getting the raw data here.
And this is where it says 90% of all the ice is in Antarctica. So, go ahead.
that there's all this hype around water running out. And the reality is that water can't leave the planet. Like, it just changes form.
Right.
So the issue is the purity of the water, not the water
That's one thing
running out.
That's one thing I've argued with lots of people is people like talking about like shut the faucet off like after for 2 seconds or something. But it's more about how we manage the water and how we take care of the water than the water's not going anywhere.
Right, the water can't leave. It's
Can't
just
leave.
changing
But we
form.
can pollute it,
Right, exactly.
as the folks up on Lake Superior
But this-
know.
but
So
this is
how
a-
we manage
yeah.
it is more important than simply the usage, how much we use.
Right, it's like another confusion, diversion, energy of like fear of it going away,
Yeah.
of not having it,
Yeah.
instead of
While Nestle is sucking water out of the ground
yeah.
away from California.
Well, and
farmers.
it's like if we could like strategically manage our water usage around like the natural systems, the water would just keep cycling. But like agriculture in the Great Plains uses the irrigation comes out of the Ogallala aquifer, and that aquifer is like
Part of it.
100 feet or 150 feet lower than it was 50 years ago, and that's a huge concern for agriculture.
That's a huge concern.
If that,
period.
If that aquifer is not available for irrigation, we'll have like 40% of the country's agriculture will be done for. Maybe that'll be a good thing. The corn and soybeans will just
Dry up.
start going away, dry up.
Right.
Right?
That's why we evolved with plants. It's part of
We are 23 chromosomes short of being a pot plant.
Yeah.
We're just short of 28 chromosomes from being a marijuana plant.
You said 23.
I think it's 23, but I'm not sure.
28 or 23?
23.
Okay.
Something.
Actually, I said that just to...
That's a lot of chromosomes.
Oh, that's not.
That is a lot of chromosomes when you think about it.
Do you talk to your plants?
I talk to my plants all the time. Just a few weeks ago, my mom was in my garden and she said, she said, I can't believe how good these vegetables look. And she's like, it must just be your energy, because I don't know. I just put compost in the soil and talk to the plants every once in a while. Harvest amazing vegetables. And it's a system. The farm system that we're building is based on an organization called Main Street Project, who is a nonprofit in Minnesota. They've been researching sustainable agriculture practices for around 10 years, and they've spent the last 5-6 years really focused on this poultry-centered regenerative agriculture system, and it's really in depth down to the energy cycles of how what comes into the system of farming and what is produced in the system and how all the energy is exchanged through the system and what outputs there are. And its goal is to minimize inputs, maximize outputs, and grow a large variety of different food products without any synthetic fertilizers or synthetic inputs. So,
And transforming the monocrop
and
template.
and trying to build a model that shows you can have a 40 or 100 acre piece of land producing several different types of food products that are healthy for people and that we don't need to use synthetic chemicals or fertilizers or herbicides or pesticides if we can establish living healthy ecosystems. Nature takes care of itself.
Where does your mind want to go?
First or second largest swing dance competition in the country, called the Dancers Annual National Competition Extravaganza. Notice the point. Almost perfect.
Do you want to tell us about your work with the head chef from the King of Nepal?
That's what I was
How'd you get there?
in. That's a long story.
Russia. We got to talk about Russia too, and the spies. Come on, dude.
Okay. I just started outlining the players. Andrei Shanovsky, the dean of the law school, was actually real good friends with the mayor of Leningrad, a man by the name of Andrei Shanovsky, who was real good friends with Boris Yeltsin and helped Yeltsin become the president. And then Gorbachev tried to retake power, and what happened was myself and a friend of mine in Richardson, Texas, were taking turns. He's the one that introduced me to Andrei Shanovsky, the dean of the law school at Leningrad. And we actually had telephone contact where we could pick up the telephone and call long distance to the dean of the law school at Leningrad, who was personal friends with the mayor of Leningrad, who was personal friends with the head of the military for the Leningrad area, and Boris Yeltsin was real good friends with the head of the military in the Moscow area. Okay? So when Boris Yeltsin tried to take back over, it came across CNN. Okay? As an update from CNN that Boris Yeltsin was trying to maintain power and Gorbachev was trying to retake over the government. Well, I placed a call to Andrei Shanovsky, the dean of the law school at Leningrad, and told him about the CNN report that Boris Yeltsin is Gorbachev is trying to take back over the government. And he didn't know it, and he said he was going to get together with the mayor of Leningrad, and they were going to get together with the head of the military, and they were going to attempt to keep the military out of Leningrad. The military had gone back in and taken over Moscow, and because Andrei Shanovsky got a hold of the mayor of Leningrad, because I called him and told him about a CNN report, I had a little bit to do with Boris Yeltsin staying president and Gorbachev to stay out of politics.
Preventing a coup.
Preventing the coup. Now, is that kind of cool? And it was just an accident. It was one of these flukes of life as you found out or will find out in some of my Vietnam experiences, it was just blind luck. Thank you. This one was the unit I was in. That was my combat patch, called United States Army Vietnam. And I think my favorite is the little Laotian Covert Operation insignia right there. MACV, that's the Military Assistance Command Vietnam. I interchanged with them quite a bit. Most of the CIA personnel that I was dealing with were actually Special Forces personnel. This is the 1st Cav Division. They were in Da Nang. I did a counterintelligence inspection on them. The year I was there was 1970, and just to shed a little bit of light, that was the year that we started moving out. And the 4th Division was one of the first units that was packing up and leaving. The way I got on the most wanted list was at about month 5, I was assigned the task of covertly assassinating and killing a guy by the name of Quang Vinh. Vinh was the most powerful Viet Cong person in all of central Vietnam. He had reportedly killed somewhere between 36 and 54 Americans, and he had killed somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 of his own people, the Vietnamese. What he would do would be he would go into these small villages and he would make the villagers donate chickens and pigs and eggs to feed the enemy, the Viet Cong. And so he put out a price on the head of the agent that was in charge of getting information on him. Then put out a price on my head of 20,000 piastres, which is roughly 3 years of basic wages for a Vietnamese person. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, one morning, in probably October, November, early November, before Thanksgiving Day, and while Vin had a price on my head, Ben Olson and I were downtown in an off-limits area having a couple of beers, and we had an assassination attempt against us. A driver and 2 shooters pulled up and started shooting at the bar. And I threw my pistol to Ben and yelled something at Ben, like cover me or do something, make some noise. And I rolled out with my M16, chambered it up, shot 3 times or 4 times at the shooters and clipped one of them, and they took a notion to leave, and they left, drove off, and Ben and I walked out of the bar with the owner of the bar screaming bloody murder. But that happened. So essentially he was feeling the heat because we were trying to get him, and we almost had him Thanksgiving Day. Okay? And he shot his way out of it, almost killed me and Abraham. We got caught in the crossfire. And that just got us all wound up for the 3rd of December. We planned another operation for the 3rd of December, okay, which was the 6th operation trying to assassinate him, and we got him. We got him with hand grenades. We had him staked out. And we came in and snuck into his what's called a spider hole. And we pulled off, actually, Abraham was the guy in charge of it. The CIA guy was in charge of it. And him and me and 4 other guys surrounded this spider hole. Abraham yelled, "Come out then." And then one of the interpreters, and I'm almost sure it was Billy, he was the best interpreter of the lot. He yelled, "Come out then," in Vietnamese, and then we threw 6 grenades in on him. And waited. Everybody sat down and had a smoke break. And then they opened up the spider hole and drug out him and his wife and his 13-year-old son. They've ended up being stolen by someone, but I actually had pictures of the bodies. And we actually took their bodies and put them on bamboo poles like pigs and hauled them around to at least a dozen villages to prove to the villagers that he was dead, because they thought he was still alive, so they would no longer fear him, correct? And it took at least a dozen trips to a dozen different villages before the villages began believing that he was dead. He had killed so many of them. Remember, he had killed between 2,000 and 3,000 of his own people. You know what got me through it was a movie. Okay? There was a movie that I watched about a similar instance in the Korean War. And the soldier allowed the wife and the kid to live and left. And 10 or 12 years later, the wife and the kid came over to the United States, hunted him down, and killed him. And that was the plot of the movie. And I got over it. Now then, we are back on Phuket Air Base, and my friend introduced me to the base commander. The base commander was quite interested in our intelligence operations because he had contacts at other air bases, especially the air base Udon, that was home of quite a few B-52 bombers. They would map everything out in Vietnam in these grids, okay, of usually 1 kilometer, okay? And in these 1 kilometer grids would be what was called radio traffic, okay? Once or twice a week, there would be a note from Major Joe of where he thought would be good spots to run a B-52 strike. And so he got into the habit of giving his opinion of where he thought there were troops based on past history and based on radio traffic that we were allowed to get from the NSA and the ASA, and he was the one that actually picked the target that caught the 20,000 troops. And like I said in my little interview with Regina, he didn't stop shaking his head for days and days and days after that happened. Probably the craziest thing we did, one night there was a Huey. A Huey was the big fat helicopter, not the Chinook, the Huey, but it was a Huey gunship. And when the pilot was absolutely stoned and drunk, well, he wasn't stoned, I don't think, unless he was stoned, but he was obviously drunk and took us for a ride, and I still don't see how we made it, except the fact that we were drunk too. Thank you for listening. There's a top secret Atomic Energy Commission document missing, and right now the Atomic Energy Commission is running a 100% document search, and we want to find that document. I'm going to send you two people. I'm going to send you a Navy SEAL and a Marine Pathfinder. Give me your best guy and put him in charge. Well, guess who Major Joe calls? I had the smarts to ask the Marine what I should do. And he said, okay, Lieutenant, what you do is you call all hands on deck. Then you find out who the highest ranking officer that's not there, and you go search his cabin. Ooh, well, that's fucking smart. That's one smart son of a bitch. And that's exactly what I did. I went right to the captain of the ship, said, call all hands on deck right now. He called all hands on deck right now. The highest ranking officer was number 3. The commanding officer and the executive officer were there. The number 3 officer was not there. Let's go search his cabin. The captain lifted up the guy's bunk and there was a fucking document. Pretty smart, huh? Ask the enlisted men. And essentially the SEAL and the Pathfinder were they actually set up a perimeter around the 3 boats. And to make sure that no sapper or frogman climbed up and lit off a bomb, because the gas tanks, the diesel tanks were kind of low, and when fuel tanks are low, they fill with vapor, and the vapor, a hand grenade, could have blown up all 3 boats. So it was pretty tense. And that's while all this other shit is going on too. I mean, that was just a break in the action for a couple of days. We did so well. The SEAL and the Pathfinder made a trip to Phuket with me for a couple of days, and we went out at night, and they got to pick off a few undesirables trying to go through. They had just a chain link fence, like a 9-foot chain link fence with barbed wire over top of it, and it was pretty easy to climb over the fence. And they could use wire cutters just as good as we can. They shot in 2 nights, got about 7 bodies. Ben and I, over a year ago, got back together after 43 years of not seeing each other. I spent several weeks of research time trying to find him, and found an old friend of his and found out where he was. And we have, over the past couple of years, have gotten to know each other. In the officers' club, there was 3 slot machines. and Ben was always playing one of the slot machines. Well, there was a famous mortar attack in Quinyon. About 6 mortars came in, and 2 or 3 hit the officers' club, and 2 or 3 hit the barracks. Well, there was a female major having sex with a male major, and she was on top. And one of the mortars went off in their barracks room, and she took some shrapnel, and he got protected. So she got a Purple Heart for being injured in battle while having sex. Okay, that was kind of made that famous. And during that particular mortar attack, everybody from the officers' club just scrambled and ran every which way, and we ran out. 2 minutes later, we walked back in the officers' club, and Ben Olson was still playing the slot machine while the building was under attack. So, you want to know how I adjusted to normal life just after I came back from Vietnam? Well, strangely enough, I went back to Bryan, Texas, and then went to work at a place called Wyatt's Cafeteria, and then after a year there, I went to work for Texas A&M as the administrative assistant to the director of food services. Part-time, I worked for my first father-in-law, Robert Armstrong, one of the most great people I've ever met in my life. He was a carpenter, and he was always needing a little help and paying a reasonable amount of money for doing odd jobs and helping him in the carpenter business. And I do remember being out in the country. I couldn't hunt, didn't want to be around guns, and every time a gun would go off, I would be hunting for cover. I was real gun shy and noise shy. And occasionally had nightmares about Vietnam. But strangely enough, I didn't start seeking help for that for many years after that. But I seemed to adjust fairly. You know, at the time, you know, still 23, and then I was 24 years old, and then 25. It was just something that was to be expected. I mean, I was, the draft was on, and I was in the military, and I was in a sensitive position, and I had quite a responsibility. But in readjusting and coming home after that is just something about it. It just happened naturally, and I really I didn't think I had any problems, and obviously I was suffering from post-traumatic stress, and in a state of denial.
Do you think it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about how your post-traumatic stress caused you to not be able to raise us for 8 years of our life and not have a relationship, and maybe tie in the healing that we've been through?
Yes, Regina wants to address the fact that I was out of her life from the time she was 8 until the time she was 17, And I was I was already married to her mother, obviously, and I was still in a state of denial, even though I began some form of treatment in 1998. I was diagnosed with PTSD in 1995 and started in 1998 with psychiatric therapy, including some pretty strong drugs. And essentially, my post-traumatic stress contributed greatly to the fact that I was unavailable for my two children, Ryan and Regina, for those years. Yes.
And how was the healing process?
The healing process continues to this day. I'm still under psychiatric care and at the VA, and I see my psychiatrist roughly either once every 6 months to a year, and I visit with the mood team, they call it, at the VA. With the psychiatric nurse, I don't particularly like that word. There's lots of
The mood team?
no psychiatric care. I'm sure I don't like being labeled a psychotic, but I am taking an antipsychotic, and you know I change when I take those pills, and I get really laid back, and I just want to say, oh, I just had some medication.
It helps to not be so high strung, like, you know.
The fireworks display at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas was one of the biggest. You know, it's in Texas. Remember, in Texas, we're known for doing things big and doing things stupid. And that's just history in Texas. But it was a really, really, really big fireworks display. And it was the end. Everybody was standing up, and it was the crescendo, and it was the big, big, big deal. The final hoorah it was the 4th of July, for the 4th of July and the founding of America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, the exact sounds start going through my head. On one side of me was the M16s from our friendly guys in Thanksgiving Day when I got in the ambush with Abraham. And the AK-47s on the right, it sounded just like AK-47s on one side, M16s on the other side, and all of a sudden I left the stadium and I was back in Vietnam, and I started trying to get out of there. I was scrambling for a rice paddy so I could get lower and get in the water and try to get away from the oncoming bullets, because I thought I was being shot at. Loretta came and got me, and she grabbed me by the wrist and said, "Everything's going to be okay, Rick. Everything's going to be okay, Rick. Come with me, Rick. Come with me, Rick. Everything's going to be okay, Rick."
She knew about your condition quite well?
Well, no, not really. I wasn't.
He had been in denial.
I was in denial. And I was going through well, okay, we might as well address this. Regina's mom, Loretta, got me into smoking pot. And I can remember Regina being able to tell if we were smoking pot by smelling our fingers. And telling the difference between a rolled cigarette and a regular cigarette. So, then the nightmares went away that I was having. And Loretta and I went on a spiritual conquest, trying to just find the truth. I was raised Catholic. She was raised Baptist in a small town of Conway, Arkansas. And we started attending the Unity Church of Dallas and studied under a teacher by the name of Donald Curtis. Along about 1983, I came up with a statement that I believed that a Christian was someone who lived their life by the example set by the first century Jewish heretic, Jesus of Nazareth. And I've held that true to my heart, and I've, over the years, tried to live by his example and also attempt to teach other people. And I guess I can say the error of their ways and the error of the ways of the way the Roman Catholic Church politicized and propagandized young children and adults into believing whatever they believe, like when you die you go to heaven, and or you go to hell. And which was a very deep, unsettling thing for me until I researched and learned that hell was actually 3 different words in the Bible: Gehenna, Hades, and Sheol. Sheol is in the Old Testament. It means pit, and that's where they buried bodies. Hades, in the Greek world, they actually believed in reincarnation all the way up until Plato, and Plato's primary student was Aristotle. Aristotle actually he called it eternal reward and eternal punishment. We know that they no longer had to go to Hades and come back in a recycle process like the Eastern religions, like Buddhism and Shintoism and Hinduism, teach that we go through incarnation after incarnation in a recycling pattern until we are able to fold in and meld with the Godhead or the primary cause of the universe, or all kinds of fun words that humans try to put on God, but it's essentially God.
From what I understand, from what I've gathered, my mom and my dad met this other man named Stephen, and there was a really strong connection between all 3 of them, and he ended up coming and living in the home with my brother and I and my mom and my dad, and raising the family together and doing really deep spiritual work, like exorcisms and like really helping the darkness shift off the planet and be returned to Creator's light, and just really deep work together. And then my mother had it in her, something shifted, and she wanted to just be with Stephen, and she wanted to kind of just explore the world in a new way. And so with him, and so she took me and my brother and Stephen, and they drove to New Mexico, and we lived in the back of a pickup truck, and the understandings of how my dad felt during that, I at one point in my elder years decided I needed to go and really understand what happened, because I just had all these little pieces. And so I gave my dad some psilocybin and started asking him questions, and finally got the truth that I had never gotten from the story, and which is that, you know, in the heart of the hearts, my dad loved my mother so much that he wanted her to have what she wanted. And that really impacted me and impacted my heart, because it doesn't usually happen like that. And there wasn't any anger or resentment in his tone of voice. Like, he really did just feel healed from that experience. And I'm sure that he went through many things during that time away from us, and not being able to even contact us or know where we were at times, from the way I understand it. And that was kind of the beginning of, you know, our kind of just not having like a, you know, living together and having a really close relationship. But so that was what I wanted to share about that. And
did this man, Steve, provide a paternal figure for you and your brother?
Well, we only lived with him for a year, I think, in the back of the truck. And he definitely like made an imprint on my being, just vibrationally, as like a godfather role, or like having that masculine figure. He also was gay. He was bisexual, and when it came down to it, he wanted to have a man and a woman in his life, and so my mom wasn't able to fulfill that. And they ended up like going their separate ways. And at that point, then my mom went back to Conway, Arkansas, where she was raised before she met my mom. And then we started seeing my dad on the summers, just, you know, during the summers from the time that was like 5 years old until I was 9. And then at 9, that's when all contact was lost with my dad. Like, no contact, like phone call, card, birthday wishes, nothing for 8 years. So me and my brother both have tried to put all kinds of pieces together to try to understand, you know, what actually happened. And it's still a little, you know, loose in my understanding. I was hoping this would help.
I started dancing and started listening to quite a bit of music. And essentially, music, dancing, and smoking pot helped get me through it, and helped my attitude. Believe that or not.
I never knew it.
It just, the combination of music and dancing. Remember that Loretta and I made very big strides in spiritual growth, and looking at ourselves as spirits incarnated as bodies instead of just stuck in some third dimension hell for a lifetime. That we are part of the spiritual universe. So we came to understand this together, and I guess I can get into, I came upon, while I was back with Loretta, of my theory of interrupted evolution according to supernatural order. Interrupted evolution according to supernatural order. Think about that. The easiest way I have to express that in a picture would be a picture of a chimpanzee and a picture of a human. And next to the human, you would have the title of evolution. When you look at the monkey, you can see millions of years of evolution. Well, it seems that when you check a lot of the anthropological raw data, it would appear that humans evolved so rapidly that it's very difficult to, shall we say, apply the current standard of evolution, meaning things happen in a very slow fashion. Okay? What happens in evolution, or interrupted evolution, is evolution comes along like this, and then all of a sudden goes like this, which would be some kind of, could be a genetic manipulation, and it could be a genetic accident. Probably not a genetic accident. And then time goes on again, and time goes on again with very little evolution. And then all of a sudden, a big jump in the ability to use tools. Let's just say for the human standpoint, the ability to use tools. And then all of a sudden, a certain amount of time goes by. Certain amount of time goes by, certain amount of time goes by, and then all of a sudden, here come the Cro-Magnons with the same abilities as humans of this time, and it, from my perspective and all the reading and anthropological study I've done, I don't see how it could happen in a slow, progressive form. Somehow, some way, we have been genetically manipulated. I happen to subscribe to the theory. Now, I've watched my son Ryan, Regina's brother, got me into the series of Ancient Aliens, and I happen to believe in the ancient astronaut theory that we have been genetically manipulated over hundreds of thousands of years, and we come to our state right now in 2017. Where was I?
Talking about the chronological order after Loretta.
No, I'm sorry. We're getting back when Loretta and I were married. We had several pretty nice adventures together. One adventure, we went out and spent 2 weeks with a freight company. I had a freight company at the time, a freight brokerage company, and we spent a couple of weeks hauling oil field pipe, load after load after load of 17-inch pipe, and it was a very fun experience. Now then, after that, I began talking with Loretta's brother-in-law, Regina's uncle Frederick Wagner, who owned the oil company, and he decided to offer me the job of operations manager for his company, Eldorado Oil and Gas, and I accepted the job, took the job, and I was his field superintendent. Actually, I was his field supervisor. We had a field superintendent named Joe Cahill, who taught me a lot about bringing in oil wells and building oil wells and completing oil wells and producing oil wells. Everyone has a mentor in that business, and mine was a guy by the name of Joe Cahill, who came out of the Depression and was a very knowledgeable person when it came to building and completing oil wells. Essentially, I worked for him on salary or contract, and full-time or part-time for the next 15 years, till from 1983 to 1998. And the only real dangerous thing, the one dangerous thing, numerous times I went out on drilling rigs when the rig hands were smoking cigarettes when they were drilling, which was awfully stupid. And the other thing that happened was a whole string of pipe got blown out of the well that we were completing. We were called perforating, and then after it perforates, the oil and the gas come back in the well, and it throws, we still had drilling mud in the hole, and it threw all of the drilling mud out, all of the oil out, all of the gas out, and then it blew all of the pipe out. It blew, it was a sand-fracked well that came back in and got away. It was the only time that it ever happened while I was working for El Dorado that a well got away. And it turned out being a great well. Obviously, when those things happen, the well is good. But it scared the absolute poop out of me and everybody around. We ended up having to run, and knocked the workover rig over and blew all of the pipe out of the hole. So that was about the most interesting thing that ever happened. I used to do paralegal work, land work for El Dorado. And then when things got tough, I got laid off. And I would work for different lawyers. I would work part-time for lawyers. So during the time I worked for El Dorado, when I got laid off, I also worked for several different lawyers. So I got experience as a paralegal, and then as a part-time accountant. I had a minor in accounting from Texas A&M, and so I became a public accountant. And that brings me up to about 7 or 8 years ago, when I started traveling to Minnesota. I was living in Oklahoma, living in a place that actually had mold. We actually tried to get rid of it. The house ended up, I was house sitting the house, and it made me tremendously sick. And I think I'll let Regina tell this story. She's got just as good a handle on it as I do, because I almost died from the mold poisoning. Mm-hmm. And here's Regina.
So I remember being in Hawaii and getting a phone call from my dad, who was in the hospital and could barely speak, and was just very sick with pneumonia. And at that point was demanding that I not come and see him. And he recovered from that. He was in the hospital for a couple weeks, and big life shift happened after that. I remember I was in Arkansas, and I was visiting my mom, and I was on my way to go to Shangri-La, to a music festival that I have been going to in Minnesota. And I stopped in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, where my dad had been living. And when I got there, I actually got in a car accident and was in pretty not good shape. But I was on my way to do a world tour, visiting all these sacred sites in Ireland and Israel and Egypt and Greece. And my dad was just getting out of the hospital, and he just said, you know, we were like trying to move him to Arkansas with my brother and my mom, and like, here, like, my mom already takes care of my grandma, she'll bring you food every couple days, you know, she'll bring you food. And Dad just was like, no. And he was determined to really take a new stance in his life and his life purpose and why he's on the planet and creating a legacy. And so he bought a camper, an old truck that's still running at the compound. And he bought a truck, and he said, well, I'll come get you and we'll drive up to Minnesota, because I couldn't take my car because it was totaled. And I'll take you to the airport to go on this tour, and then I'll come back to Oklahoma and do my thing or whatever. And I said, okay. And so he came and got me, and we went and drove to Minnesota, and we went to our friend's little garage studio space, Red Star and Drewski. And that's where we all like got ready for the big trip that we were going on. And my dad was there, and he was there for a couple days, and then he helped get us off to the airport. And then my dad just didn't leave Minnesota. He stayed in that warehouse with no, there was running water, but there was no shower facility or anything. And he started, you know, concocting this manifestation of a hydrogen generator that he has still been working on and still, in the process of fine-tuning. And that's when he really kind of just implemented himself into the life that I had been creating in Minnesota since I was 20. And so he stayed there until I got back, and then he ended up moving in to the Ohm home, we call it. And at that point, he was definitely in the thick of his mania or hypomania, like very unmedicated. Because at that point, when he had got that truck and came to Minnesota, he just cut himself off of all the medications. He got off of all, because that's what happened is he was on the Klonopin, and when he went into the hospital for pneumonia, they were like, whoa, you're still on this really intense Klonopin and you need to get off of it. So we're actually going to send you to the psych ward. And he had to go to the psych ward to get off of the Klonopin. And he got off the medications and started just doing alternative medications and then ended up reaching some really intense psychological spaces in Minnesota that have since been forgiven and wrapped into balls of beautiful light and compassion for what he's been through in his life and the energy that he's had to be.
I have been prompted to speak of my ex and my ex-girlfriend Linda and my new girlfriend Linda.
Where you met her?
I met my current new girlfriend, Linda, while I was staying with a client of mine and a very, very, very good friend at a nudist resort. They have different categories, camps, and nudist camps, and nudist
colonies.
this, and colonies, and then nudist resorts. And I don't know, they considered it a nudist resort. And I was there for 2 months, relaxing and living a life at ease and doing a little accounting and tax work for my friends. And right catty-corner from their RV, their huge Class A RV, was a girl named Kat who had a friend named Linda. And Linda was just around, and we just got to sitting and talking, naked. And we just got to know and like each other, and had a few experiences together at the nudist resort. And then I headed up to Minnesota to go stay with her.
Well, yeah, then you realized that you guys lived in the same place, Minnesota. You were in Texas.
Yes, I was from Texas and she was from Minnesota. I realized that she was from, actually it came down that she was like 8 miles.
Away from where we were living.
Yeah, about 20 minutes from, Linda lived about 20 minutes from in Brooklyn Park, where Alana was living. I'm sorry, where Regina was living at Alana's house. That's what I get for listening to Regina. But I love listening to Regina.
Put that in there for sure.
Yes. And so we lived together for 6 months, and then the long and the short of it was we got along very good for a while, and then we didn't get along hardly at all for the last couple of months, and we decided to break up and become friends, and then we decided to become friends with benefits. So that is getting into the latest in the saga of Linda and Rick, is that we have both decided. Well, okay, this whole thing started about 6 months ago when Linda decided she might think about selling her house because she's got a property. She owns a trailer up on she calls it camp, at a nudist camp, 40 minutes from Minnesota. And she's on the board of directors, and so she's got a pretty good place to stay for the summers. And she was wanting to spend her summers in Minnesota and her winters in Florida. And I thought that was a pretty good idea. Well, all of a sudden she got an offer on her house, and then every time we would talk about it, every 2 or 3 days, and then she would start making hints that she might like me to come stay with her where she stayed in Florida. And I told her that sounded interesting. Well, to make a long story short, we have finally agreed to split rent on a pretty nice place around Tampa, Florida, and a pretty nice place in Panama City, Florida, which is up in the panhandle of Florida, because most of Florida was already booked for the winter, the peninsula part. And Linda and I are planning on spending a wonderful 6 months together in Florida and attempting to get our shit together and decide if we want to be in a relationship. Thank you very much for listening.
Show you what the